Hey everyone, got another car here in the garage for some service work. It's a poorly running SPI Mini. This one's owned by a man named Tommy. You might recognize this car. It's got a really nice interior. Check out this interior. Lovely red vinyl, nice seats. This car does have the full Japanese spec, so it has the full air conditioning dash. By the way, I love this tiny glove box. Like, what are you gonna put in there? Anyway, yeah, love the interior. It's kind of fun. It's a dark black exterior with a white top, and you might recognize this car because it's on the Fast Lane channel. So this is Tommy's car, and like I said, it's not running very well, so it's in here for service, and I'll have to figure out what's going on. Let's check out this side of the car here. It's got a nice Nardi brand steering wheel, so love to see that. But let's go check out what's going on underneath the hood here. I'm always impressed at how much stuff these Japanese spec cars have hiding under the bonnet. And here we are under the bonnet. Man, that's a lot of stuff. Condensers and all the air conditioning hoses and dryers and things like that. Man. I know I prefer to work on my red car because it's got a lot less stuff underneath the hood here. But anyway, I'll figure out what's going on in this car. Like I said, it wasn't running very well. It seemed to be running rich, so I need to check vacuum lines on this car. And on these later Japanese cars with the air conditioning, they don't have the computer over here. They actually move it into the interior. So I need to check the long vacuum line that runs to the manifold on this. But I'll get my computer out and I'll start checking with the ECU connections, and I will do a full ignition system check as well. So this will be an interesting project. Just as a reminder, this is what a 71 car looks like underneath the hood. A lot less stuff under here. Well, like any good fuel-injected computer car, probably best to start with checking fault codes. So I got my Sykes out here, and we'll just interrogate the computer and see what it says. All right, it says no codes. So the computer is not complaining about anything. Let's check what the components are doing. So idle is, it's not running, so idle's off. Manifold pressure is reading correct right now. 82 kPa is about the right pressure for this altitude that I'm at. Coolant temperature 12 Celsius, air temperature 14 Celsius. So at least the coolant and the air are currently reading about the same temperature. We'll check that later on once it's running to see if it's still accurate. And then, yeah, battery position is okay. So far off of here, I don't see anything that's out of the unusual. So whatever the running problem is that this car has, the computer is certainly not complaining about it, at least in terms of a fault code. Now, I've obviously found cars that have no faults and yet have been running poorly, like that green single point car I had earlier. So I'll just have to go through the process of checking all the parts first and making sure they're actually in good spec. But since this didn't say anything specifically, I'm going to go ahead and turn my attention to the ignition system, make sure this is all good before I go any further. But yeah, this car will still be a mystery until I figure out what the heck happened to it. So first thing, let's check the coil resistance, and we'll start by zeroing our gauge. So the meter reads 0.2 or 3. Okay, so we'll just hook up the coil wire to the gauge, or I should say the post of the coil to the gauge, and we're reading 1.8, 1.7. This 1.6. So this coil is out of spec. It should be 0.8 ohms. So it'll need a new coil. This is certainly out of range. So after this, we'll go ahead and check a spark plug wire, see what kind of resistance the wires have, and then I'll go ahead and take a plug out and check the condition of the plug. So I managed to get the coil wire for number 3 out of here, and let's go ahead and check its range resistance. Looks like about 5,000 ohms. So I'm going to say that the ignition wires represent about 10,000 ohms of resistance. Again, fairly standard wire resistance for a later car. So next up, I'm going to pull one of these plugs out and check that resistance as well. So I've got one of the plugs out. It is a resistive NGK BPR6 ES plug that you can see is really fouled out. So I'm just going to double check the gap here, and it's about 35 thousandths on here. Pretty good, but yeah, those are certainly fouled out. Also, they've got that Corona stain on them, so this may be getting a set of plugs. Not sure if I need to change the wires out yet or not, but I am going to change out the coil for sure to a fresh coil. So I have noticed one small detail in that this breather cap here is very, very loose. So I'm going to go ahead and fit a new one because, again, this is a maintenance item. So if you don't know about my breather video explanation, go check out the video link here. But yeah, this cap, again, it's designed to take air in through the mesh here into the motor. But it seems like the seal on this one is just really bad because it shouldn't be all wiggly and loose like this. So I'm going to fit a new cap as well. Try to tighten up this this breathing system a little bit. This could be throwing the whole thing off right here. If there's getting too much air through here, then the computer's going to have to add fuel to the system because it's just going to be pulling too much air through this cap. So I'm going to go ahead and fit a new cap when I put a new coil on here and wires. And then I'll go ahead and start it up and see what the computer says as far as air temperature, water temperature, and manifold pressure to see if they rise appropriately or not. And that'll tell me more information about the manifold hose that goes from the manifold to the ECU. So with the air pressure around 80 kPa, with it not running, it typically goes down to about 30 or so kPa when it is running. If I don't see a change on the sensor on my gauge at the the computer's not reading any change in manifold pressure, then I know I have to go take a look at the vacuum lines. But if it does see a change, then I know at least it's seeing a change, and so it should be working. And then I'll have to watch the air temperature and coolant temperatures to see if they respond appropriately. Like I said, on that last injection car, I had a problem where the coolant loop in the manifold was blocked, and so the coolant temperature sensor did not get up to temperature right away. And I ended up having to do a bunch of repair work to get that to work properly. So hopefully this car doesn't have that same problem, but until it's up and running again, I won't know. But I don't want to start it up until I've got fresh plugs, fresh coil, and a new cap. I might also change these wires out to a set of power spark just to lower the resistance a bit, just to get more power out of this system. But I will be keeping the BPR spark plugs because this car has, again, a computer and a stereo, so I don't want to cause too much interference in those systems. So I'm leaving the resistor plugs alone for that reason. So here we have the new plugs. These should be BPR 6s. And I'm going to go ahead and fit these. Now, one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to double check the gaps on every single one of these plugs. Even though they're supposed to come gap from the factory, we always want to check the gaps, make sure that they are accurate, because that's how you get performance, is knowing that the parts you're fitting are correct. So this is gapped at 35 thou. I've just verified, so I will go ahead and fit this plug, and I'll do the rest of the plugs as well. But again, just because you buy parts that are brand new doesn't mean they're necessarily ready to go on the motor. You have to double check and make sure that they are accurate for your engine. And in this case, this engine is running the BPR 6 ES spark plugs gapped at 35 thou plug gaps. So I got the cap off, got the wires off, and I measured all the resistance of each of these wires, and it goes from 5 to about 8K per wire. So I'm going to go ahead and replace this entire set of wires. Also, in the cap, there's some pretty heavy buildup on the posts. Might not be hard to see on the camera, but I'm going to go ahead and replace the cap and rotor as well. So once again, all new ignition system for one of these injection cars. But it looks like it was needed, so I don't mind fitting it. But yeah, make sure you test all your parts and check everything, because you never know. Like I said, looks can be deceiving sometimes, and even though these looked okay, they just weren't right. Moving on, after the ignition, I went ahead and pulled the air cleaner off to get access to all the tubes here. These run from the back of the manifold, and this one runs the little valve that opens the air filter housing to the exhaust gas to let it take hot air in under cold start. But it also lets me get access to the fuel separator for the main ECU. So one line from the manifold comes to this, the other line goes to the ECU, and I've gone ahead and pulled it out here. So this is the one that runs to the ECU and the footwell. And when you look down here, you can see a little bit of green. Well, that's because it's actually broken off from the fuel vapor separator. So I have here a good to use one. You can see it's got a green, the green fitting. Well, on this one here, it's been broken off. So the tube just broke off on this. So this is probably the main reason why it wasn't running right, because the ECU wasn't receiving the proper signal from the manifold. So I'm gonna go ahead and switch out that fuel trap for the other one I have, and then I'll be able to run this car. I do want to double check all the condition of these hoses. Like I said, any cracks or issues with these hoses, and you have air leaks at the manifold, which will cause the ECU to have issues. So I'm going to go ahead and finish inspecting these after I've replaced that fuel separator. But check these out and see what the conditions are like. And if everything looks good, I'm going to go ahead and start it up and run it and see what the computer says about the other sensors. We'll be able to compare the air intake temperature sensor here to actual air temperature using a laser temperature gun. And then I'll double check the coolant loop, make sure it's warming up properly, and not having that same blocked coolant loop that I had last time. So just for comparison's sake, you can see this is the one that broke. All right, so now I'm set up to do the first cold start on this car. I've got my tuning gauge hooked up to the exhaust. It's 1.52 lambda, which is, it's not running, so it's just air, atmospheric air right here. But when it is running, I'll be able to monitor what the fueling is doing based on what the gauge says here. Hopefully it's somewhere around lambda 1.01 once it's all warmed up. Obviously this thing is very cold. The garage temperature is about, 45, 44 degrees Fahrenheit in here. So I'll be able to monitor air intake temperatures against, the ambient here. And then I'll also be using my code reader to check the sensor readings according to the ECU. And while that's happening, I'm going to be checking over here the coolant lines going in and out of the manifold to make sure the manifold is warming up properly. So we'll go ahead and get this started, and we'll see what kind of numbers we get out of this thing. I'm hoping between the vacuum line going to the fuel separator and the new cap, I've fixed the vacuum issues, but we'll see. So right there, about 1200 RPMs, that's the standard high idle for warm-up. .42 kPa. It tells me the computer is sensing the intake manifold vacuum. Yeah, and the coolant is cold, so we'll watch this rise up. Well, so far so good. We've got rising coolant temperature. I've got a very efficient idle at 1.03 or 1.04. That's excellent. And when I come over here and verify the temperature of the coolant line, we got about 30-something degrees on this gauge. So clearly the computer is reading a much higher temperature, because it's actually reading the coolant temperature than I am reading with this, which is excellent to see. That means the coolant temperature sensor is doing something. But yeah, so far this is starting up and running normally. Once I get it out on the road, I'll be able to test it better to see how it performs on the road. But yeah, so far I'm seeing all nominal readings Alright, so I'm out on a test drive, Tommy's car here, and coolant is registering properly up to the little white dot. Idle's a bit higher than I'd like to see it, but it seems to be creeping down a little bit, so I'm not going to worry about that too much until I've driven this car quite a bit. Signals don't really, it's very sloppy, so I suspect that the signal assembly is just broken or something, but more importantly, there's some sort of clunking sound going on in the back. There's some sort of excessive squeak happening from somewhere in that corner, maybe a disc brake related issue or something, so I'll have to check those out. But otherwise, this car drives really nicely. Just a real pleasant car, has good power. Here's that noise. Classic dust shield. So here's those dust shields. Front left had a broken mount. Front right was just bent out of shape. So I just took them off. I was like, you don't need these. Let's just get them off the car because they always end up breaking anyway. Either the mount breaks around the bolt, or you'll find them where they break down here at the bends. But basically this is just a cheap stamped piece of steel, sheet steel, and the vibrations just destroy them. So taking them off and you won't have any rattles in the future. So that was the problem with this side. And yeah, it was actually really loud. I was surprised at how loud the side was. You can see here it was actually hitting right there against the disc itself. So certainly time to be taken off the car. No longer needed. So I think I got the noise sorted out here. I think that the nut on the shock has loosened up, or the bushings have kind of worn out, but basically the shock is allowed to travel a little bit before it grabs the trailing arm. So I think it just gives a really terrible tapping sound because of that. So I'm going to see if I can tighten that up and make the noise go away. Well, I've pretty much wrapped up Tommy's Mini. So I ended up going in the back, tightening up all those shock mounts, and that pretty much fixed the back end. It still has a bit of shock noise, so I think it does need a set of back shocks, but in the front, I took off the dust shields completely. One side had a broken mount, the other one was all bent out of shape, so no more dust shields in the front, no more rattling sounds. And I also fitted a pair of hood buffers to keep the hood from rattling, because I noticed that was rattling as well. So other than that, I think that was pretty much it. Like I said, the big problem on this car was the bad vacuum line, and then the bad filler cap. Like I said, I think that was causing a terrible vacuum leak. But got that sorted out. And I mentioned before, oil filler caps are service items. So if you haven't changed one of yours out in a while, you might consider putting on a fresh one. And yeah, one more shot of this lovely interior for everyone to see. Nice. Anyway, if you guys thought that was interesting or helpful, let me know in the comments below. As always, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys soon.